Hello, now we're on to section 6.3. We're looking at trinomials with leading coefficients other than 1. Think back to 6.2. We looked at trinomials that might look like x squared plus 5x plus 6, meaning they had that leading coefficient of 1, and we were able to factor them pretty easily. Now you'll notice that all the ones down in the practice that we are factoring, they do not have a leading coefficient of 1. We are going to start by doing some practice of the multiplying to see how these trinomials are formed. So the first one here, we have 3x plus 1 times x plus 2. We know it's going to start with 3x times x, which is 3x squared, 3x times 2, which is 6x, 1 times x is just 1x or x, and 1 times 2 is a positive 2. Next thing we have to do is combine our like terms, which gives us 3x squared plus 7x, and lastly we have this plus 2. Now it says observe the outer and inner terms as they are created. So we know that this term here is created from the product of this and this, which is the first two. We know the last term is created from the product of the last two. The middle two terms are created from the product of the inside two and then the product of the outside two. The more comfortable you are with these relationships of how these things are formed makes the factoring a lot easier. Let's look at another one. We're going to jump over to number 3. We start with, 5x squared, and then a negative 10x, a negative 4x, and lastly a positive 8. Again, we want to combine our like terms, so we're left with 5x squared minus 14x plus 8. One thing we can also notice is that 5 is prime. Its factors are 1 and 5. Notice that the coefficients here are 1 and 5. Now 8 is not prime, it's composite. It has factors of 1 and 8 and 2 and 4. And notice that the factorization 2 and 4 are there. And then again, we take the product of the inside, the product of the outside, and that's what gives us our middle term. Lastly, let's do number 5 together. Here we're getting 4x squared minus 6x plus 10x minus 15. Combine our like terms in the middle, 4x squared plus 4x minus 15. Again, since our two coefficients in our binomials are 2 and 2, that's what gives us this 4. Again, that's a factorization of 4. 15, a factorization is 5 and negative 3. And then the insides is positive 10, negative 6, which leaves us with the 4. Okay, now what I want you to do is do numbers 2, 4, and 6, then unpause the video and check your answers. Okay, you can go ahead and then repause the video and check your answers for 2, 4, and 6. Now I want to look at number 6. We have this 12x squared minus 23x minus 24. Notice that there are a lot of factorizations of 12. You could have 1 and 12, you could have 2 times 6, you could have 3 times 4, which in this one's using the 3 and the 4. And then we also have a negative 24. That one also has a lot of factorizations. 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 6 and 4, 3 and 8. And what you have to do is find the right combination so that the middle term and the outside terms have a sum of whatever your middle trinomial term is. So let's look at number 1 here together. First thing you want to do is make sure that it is in order. So first thing you should check for all of these is the order. In this one, it does have the squared, then the x to the first power, and then the constant term. So that one's good. The next thing you always want to check for is a GCF. Well, here, a 3, 14, and negative 5, and there's not an x and everything, so they only have a GCF of 1, so we're good to go. But these are the things you want to check for when you start all of the problems below. Okay. So now, once we check those things, we can start by creating our two binomials. I always recommend write the parentheses out because it kind of helps us. Now, looking at the first term, it's a 3x squared. We know that you need an x here and an x here. Since 3 is prime, it makes it a lot easier because you know one of these factors have to be 3x and the other one has to be x. So we have 3x as a factor, x as a factor. Together they make 3x squared. Now, looking at the last term, we have a 5. That one's also pretty easy because it's prime. So you know that it's going to be 1 and 5. But you have to figure out, do you put the 1 right here or do you put the 5 right here? And then the other one would go here. And that's where you have to look at this middle term and you have to think of what combination do you want to make. Keep in mind, these middle two terms, the product of these plus the product of the outside need to add up to this. So if we put the 5 here, you'd have a 5x and a 3x. That's not going to give you a negative 14. So we think, okay, well, if we put the 5 out here, now we know 3x and 5 would make 15. So that's going to lead us in the correct direction. So we at least have our numbers in the correct place. If you need to, you can do a little thing that looks like this. This would give us 1x. This would give us 15x. Now, we need that to be a negative 14. So we need one of these values to be negative. Right, and if we want the middle term to be negative, we need that larger value to be negative, which means the subtraction sign needs to go into that binomial, and then this would be an addition sign. And then to check your answer, you would just FOIL. 3x times x is 3x squared. We'd have a positive 1 and a negative 15x, which would give us that negative 14x. 1 times negative 5 is negative 5. So therefore, this would be our final answer. Don't forget to always circle your final answer. That way I know that you're finished with the problem and you're showing me what it is. Okay, I want you to now go ahead and try number 2 on your own, and then unpause the video. Okay, so looking at this one together, we know that our first term has to be 5x squared. Since 5 is prime, it makes it easier. We know that factorization of 5x squared would be a 5x and an x. That's the only way we can do it. Now, we want to look at this last term, a 4. We know factorizations of 4 are 1 and 4, and then 2 and 2. If we had a 1 here and a 4 here, that would give us an outside term of 20, which that's going to be way too big for this, especially when that inside one would only be 1. And if we switched it, if we put this is our 4, this is our 1, we'd have a 4x and a 5x. Again, isn't going to give us 12. So now we want to try the 2 and 2, which we can find here that we have a 2 and a negative 2. Now, you might think, okay, well, why do we use negatives? Well, we know we have to have a product of a positive 4, which would be a negative 2 times negative 2. And we want that middle term to be negative as well. And you can see that under here, I just drew some work just to kind of check. I know that I would have a 2x and a 10x, and I need them both to be negative, so they're both subtraction signs. Okay, let's do let's see here. Let's look at number 7 together. So looking at number 7, I see that it is in order. Now GCF, 15, a 20, and a 75. I know we can divide all of them by a 5, so that means that we can factor out a 5 here. So we're going to do that first. So we factor out a 5. I'm left with 3y squared plus 4y, and then we have to do minus 15. Again, double check that you did this correctly by saying 5 times 3 is 15, y squared, 5 times 4y is 20y, 5 times negative 15 is 75. Now what we have to do is factor out what's inside those parentheses. Make sure you bring down your 5 with you. 3y squared, well then we know that has to be a 3y and a y. Negative 15, we could either use 1 and 15, but just to show you, if we put a 1 here and a 15, that would be a 1y, and a 15 times 3 would be 45y. That's not going to give us that middle value of 4 like we need. So if we switched them and we had 15 here and 1 here, that'd give us a 15 and 3. Again, that's not going to give us the 4. So we know we must use 3 and 5 somehow. We need to get it to be a 4. So we need, if we put the middle term is a 3 and the outside term is a 5, that's going to give us a 15 and a 3, still not going to give us the 4. So then, okay, what if we switch them? We put 5 and 3. That would be a 9 and 5, which we know we can get a 4 from a 9 and a 5. We need it to be a negative 15, so we know one of these need to be negative. I recommend doing this middle step first then. We know this is a 5y, This out here would be a 9y. We need that 4 to be plus, so that means that 9 needs to be positive, the 5 needs to be negative. So our signs would go like that. 3y squared plus 9y minus 5y minus 15. That would be our final answer. As you get familiar with these problems, you'll start to notice like when would the factors 1 and 15 not even bother working. So you don't have to try them every time because you'll start to get a feel for what's going to work and what isn't. So what I would like you to do now is pause the video and try out, we'll start with numbers 3 and 4. So just do numbers 3 and 4, then unpause the video. Okay, number 3, we're getting factors of 2x plus 7 and x plus 1. Number 4, we're getting factors of 3n minus 2 and 2n plus 1. You'll see in number 3, I didn't show much work here since 2's prime and 7's prime. It makes it a little bit easier than the rest. It's when you have factors that are composite that you have to put a little bit more thinking into it. Okay, what I want you to do is finish 5, 6, and 8, then unpause the video and check your answers. Okay, so what you can do now is pause the video if you need to and check all your answers. They're all pretty straightforward. You'll notice that numbers 5 and 6, they start with the same term and they both end with an 8, one's negative, one's positive. And you can see how that alters what's going to go as the other terms there, and the negative and the positive. You also know number 8, I put an asterisk by it because we need to reorder it. We reorder it and then we know that there's a greatest common factor. Now, some might look at this and think it's very complicated looking because your numbers are bigger, but 3's prime and so is 7, so it does make it a bit easier. And we know we need to get a middle term of 22x, so you know you're going to need to multiply that 7 and that 3 together to get a number that much higher than those. So go ahead if you need to, pause the video, check your answers, and when you're ready, move on to the next page. Okay, you'll see that we have 4 more examples at the top here. So again, we're going to have you pause the video and continue working through those. When you're finished, unpause, check your answers. Okay, looking at number 9, I put an asterisk by it because we need to reorder it. When we reorder it, we notice that that leading term is a negative. So, take out the factor of a negative 1. So our GCF is negative 1. We factor that out, and then 4x squared, so it's either 4 and 1 or 2 and 2. If you need to, you can guess and check. Try one. If it doesn't work, try the other. So we have 4x and x, and we have to get a negative 6, so I used a 3 and a 2. That gives me a 3x and an 8x, and I need it to be negative to get the 5, so we put the negative with the 2. And then we have, let's see, number 10. When we look at number 10, we have 2c and 7. So I start with 2c and c. Since 7's prime, I know either has to be 7 and 1 or 1 and 7. But if I put a 1 here and the 7 out here, that'd be 14, and that's not going to give me a 3. If I put the 7 here and the 1 here, then I have a 7 and a 2. That's still not going to give me a 3. So we know that's prime. Number 14, we have x's and y, so we have to make sure you include the y with the second factor. Number 12, we notice that we can take out a GCF first, and then we're left with 3x squared minus x minus 4. Since 3 is prime, we have a 3x and an x, so we can end for 4 either 4 and 1 or 2 and 2. We find it to be 3x minus 4 and x plus 1. Don't forget, when you factor out a greatest common factor, you need to make sure you include that there or your answer is wrong. Also, you can check anything that only has a single variable in it, like 9, 10, and 12. You can type the original in your calculator and your answer, and they should have all the same y values when you'd graph them. Okay, now looking at the last 4 here, we're going to be solving these. So your answer won't look like this. Your answers will be composed of just the solutions to these equations. So we're going to solve these just like we solved ones before. You have to start by getting all your terms onto one side. So let's go ahead and we'll look at number 2 together. I'll let you work through the first one. So we have to add that 3n. So now we have 8n cubed plus 10n squared plus 3n equals 0. Well, I notice right away that I have a GCF here. And my GCF is going to be n. So I want to factor that n out. And then I'm left with 8n squared plus 10n plus 3 equals 0. And then we want to factor what we have left. So now, I know that 8, you could have factors of 8 and 1, or you could have factors of 2 and 4. If I use the 8 and 1, though, no matter how I work an 8 and 1, if I have to work it with a 3, I'm never going to be able to get a 10. So that gives me a hint that I need to use a 4n and a 2n. Now a 3. If I put the 3 right here, that would give me a 6n and a 4n, which would give me the 10 that I need. So 3 and then 1. And these are both plus, so they should be plus. And then just to kind of do a quick check, this would be 6n, that would be 4n, which is what we want. Now notice here, we have 3 factors. So we have to let n be equal to 0, 4n plus 3 equals 0, and 2n plus 1 equals 0. And we solve each of these. Well, we have n equals 0, then we have 4n equals negative 3, so n equals negative 3/4. And then we have 2n equals negative 1, so we get n equals negative 1/2. So therefore, our solutions to this are 0, negative 3/4, negative 1/2. Now notice we have 3 solutions, and we go back up and look at our equation, we do see the highest exponent of 3, so that's okay. Keep in mind, you can never have more solutions than the highest exponent. Go ahead and try 1, 3, and 4. Make sure you're checking your answers either with your calculator or substituting your values back in. When you're finished, unpause, check your answers. Okay, you can check your answers. Number 1, we're getting negative 3/2 and negative 8. We did number 2 together. Number 3, you're getting a 1/2 and a 3. Be very careful. We had to find a GCF here of 2, so you factor out that 2. But then when you say 2 is equal to 0, that's not true. 0 is not a factor here because there is no variable. Also, the highest exponent is 2, so you can only have at the most 2 solutions. Number 4, we get 1/2 and negative 4/3. Okay, that's all we have for the 6.3 video. So good luck on your homework and make sure you reach out with any questions.